What the city is talking about. This is Montreal Now on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
That is James MENNIE over at the Montreal Gazette. So, Jim, a new OQLF poll apparently shows that, and this is going to come as a shocker, there are still people speaking French in Quebec.
Yeah, and apparently the proportion of people speaking French in public, which means outside of their home and with persons other than their family or their friends, stood at 79% last year, or rather in 2022, and that the proportion has remained relatively unchanged since they started doing these surveys in 2007. Now, of course, people, reasonable people would say, well, that goes to show that this whole idea that French is in decline is just a load of crap, and it's just a completely fabricated story. But the people who put out these things, who want to spread these kinds of narratives, will turn around and say, well, in 2007, we were far fewer people in Quebec, so that the fact that proportion is the same is not good. We're now 9 million people, which means that we're in fact losing ground. And of course, the outlaw region of Quebec, the 514, the Greater Montreal area, the proportion of those using French almost exclusively in public discourse is only at 68%. So clearly, this will be fastened upon by the government of the day as proof once again that there is a huge crisis in Quebec. That crisis is centered in the Greater Montreal area, and of course, we'll need all kinds of legislation and special measures to deal with it. But I got to tell you, Aaron, it must be fun working at the OQLF because I'm looking at some of these questions. And what I really love is when they narrow some of the questions down, and some of the findings I found are quite fascinating. For example, 90% of the respondents who said they use French all the time. The situations where you would be using French in public, 90% of the time it was in communications with the provincial government, okay, or 78% with the food delivery guy, okay. They asked the same question for English, okay? It was 14% in dealings with the federal government and 14% in dealing with the food delivery guy.
Okay. Well, I guess
I think
something to be said for consistency.
Guy is messing with us.
You think?
Well, I'm not making this up, but the food delivery guy is in there twice. So I'm just thinking that some of these questions are so unusually formulated that you can pretty well create whatever image you want to have. Yeah. Oh, that said as well, and the one finding of this poll that I do tend to dispute, even though the sampling, it's an incredibly large sampling, 7,100 people are part of this survey, but the part I dispute is we have 11% of Francophones saying they have not received service in French in a store in the Greater Montreal area, and I personally, given my own experience as a shopper in the Greater Montreal area, I find that extremely difficult.
Yeah, so do I, and that's the thing that always comes up, and it's always anecdotal, right? Because I can't believe it would be that widespread either. So I'm with you on that. I wonder, Jim, do you think there's any chance the food delivery guy might have been a plant?
Well, you never know. And, the other question, given the way, because we one of the things I've raised all the time is when you make a complaint to the OQLF, you don't have to give your name. So we don't know how many plaintiffs there actually are. I don't even know. It could be the same food delivery guy, Aaron. This is what gets me.
That's right.
There is a food delivery guy out there listening to us right now, just laughing his butt off because he knows he made it once again into the OQLF survey.
That's right. He made it again this year. All right. Let's move on from that and talk about obviously the story of the day. Big power failure. You heard Hydro. They're making progress, as they always tell us when these kinds of things happen. It was interesting. There was a story this week out in, I guess it's in Beaconsfield, right, where the mayor out there is again kind of banging on the drum to get Hydro to bury lines because that'll solve everything. Where are we? I mean, this has not been a good start for Michael Sabia as the head of Hydro.
No, not exactly. But I got to tell you, Aaron, we may be on the verge of creating a new provincial, or if you prefer, national holiday, which would be Grid Collapse Day. I discovered this. I was listening to the morning show, and we were all in Stormwatch coverage this morning. 1 year less 1 day ago, in other words, on April 5th, 2023, 1.1 million Quebecers were without power because of an ice storm that basically caused the grid to collapse. Then as now, it was the same regions. Then as now, it was the same problems being raised, branches hitting wires and so on and so forth. So yes, the mayor of Beaconsfield can turn around and say, yep, we've got to bury the wires. But I just find it fascinating that despite the fact literally millions of Quebecers are talking about this story right now, this is the last thing on earth the government will talk about when it comes to Hydro-Quebec. Providing, virtually free electricity to foreign investors seems to be a priority. Trying to build more dams or increase production to accommodate those foreign investors seems to be a priority. But the simple idea of somehow bringing the grid into the 21st century, into a society which supposedly prides itself on using clean energy and using electricity, the fact is it's no longer extraordinary for you and I to talk about literally hundreds of thousands of Quebecers being without power because of a weather event that took less than 24 hours to occur.
You have to wonder though, Jim, and we're not engineers, sir. We don't know how that would be. But when you talk about modernizing the system beyond burying a line, where's the modernization? What's involved? Do you have any idea?
I would suspect that it is like Occam's razor, I'm afraid. You bury the damn wires. And no, you don't have to do them all at once, but certainly in areas where we see now tens of thousands of people, like in the Laurentians, clearly there's been urban development there. The fact is maybe you could prioritize those areas to start with. And whenever possible, bury the mains at least. Bury the lines from whatever, from the pole to the house. Maybe that's going to be an issue, but at least the main lines, get them underground. And if we're talking about billions of dollars, listen, I'm getting used to hearing about billions of dollars being used to create battery companies here. So, I think maybe if we're going to start spending billions of dollars, let's start spending it on Quebecers, no matter what language they speak, and ensure they have heat and light in a part of the world where winter usually lasts about 6 months.
Last question. We're a little late, but I want to get your take on this because this is the question I asked today. I don't know if you heard Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois going on about private health care and the fact he'd like to see every Tom, Dick, and Harry who wants to open up a private medical clinic going forward just simply not have that opportunity. It brings up the discussion again about private versus public health care and waiting lists that this government doesn't seem to have been able to do anything about. Where do you think we are on this? I mean, are we looking at that?
I'll tell you where you shouldn't be, which is standing behind Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois because he's about to be hit by a steamroller.
Okay.
The privatization of healthcare in Quebec and across this country is inevitable. The only question is how quickly it will occur. But, people saying, well, we don't want two-tiered healthcare. You already have two-tiered healthcare. And that's just the people who've got, health insurance, medical insurance at work. But, yeah, we are seeing the difference, the incredible difference. And this is nothing against the public sector. They've been underfunded and understaffed for years. But the fact is the private sector will take a larger slice of that pie, and people will pay for it. But the idea that, Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois, the usual kind of, let's ban that, no, not going to happen, my friend. Not now, not ever.
James MENNIE at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
Not a man.